How to Train Your Dragon is one of my favorite animated movies, and when I heard a live-action remake was in the works, I was skeptical to say the least. Live-action remakes of animated films don't always have the best track record. However, I was pleasantly surprised and maybe even blown away by this 2025 remake, and it's time we talk about what makes this movie work when so many live-action remakes fail. Welcome, my name is Kelly, and this is Fanimated, an animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. And really quick, for the longtime listeners of Fanimated, yes, the show has been on a break and a hiatus for the last 2.5 years. I kind of retired the podcast, but I couldn't stay away when it comes to How to Train Your Dragon. So I'm releasing episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the other platforms. However, those will disappear after a month, so please subscribe on YouTube for updates and to see the entire back catalog of over 150 past episodes. YouTube is where everything will live for a longer time, and so if you want to listen back on those episodes or be updated on new episodes coming out, definitely check it out on YouTube. I'll chat a bit more about what you can expect from the podcast a little later in this episode, but for now, let's jump right into my thoughts about DreamWorks' 2025 film, How to Train Your Dragon. So, like I said, I went into this film with very low expectations, which is usually my philosophy for most live-action remakes, because if I go in with really low expectations, then it's more likely that the film will meet those low expectations. And if the film is a little bit better than that, then great. Obviously, live-action remakes are mostly just a money grab from studios. We all know this. We all know that some of them are just complete flops and completely disrespectful to the original, media, and have tumultuous histories with live action remakes. So going into this one, I definitely didn't want to get my hopes up. However, How to Train Your Dragon is my favorite animated movie, and I had to go see it in theaters. And what makes most remakes flop, in my opinion, are that they often lose that sparkle and magic that make the original animated films work. And sometimes directors just do not understand where the animated film is coming from or have respect for the original source material, and it just turns into a film that is very lackluster and doesn't have that magic. And some animated films literally need to stay animated in order to work. Like, animation and live action are completely different mediums. They portray completely different things, and they communicate in a visual language so differently. And some animated films, what makes them special is the animation that is going alongside with it. So then when you try to make it a live action, it just doesn't communicate the same way. Aside from perhaps this film, I do think Disney's 2015 Cinderella remake is one of my favorite live action remakes from animation. And I think it's one of the best and maybe one of the only good animation live actions that we have, because it's still able to hold the magic of the original, but it adds new depth to the story and some beautiful visuals. And so it's very engrossing, and it's a beautiful take on Cinderella, and I think is still one of the best live action remakes. And so my thoughts have always been that in order to make a good remake, it needs to be like 2015 Cinderella. It needs to, take the original story, but make it different and make it new and make it exciting. And surprisingly, How to Train Your Dragon doesn't really do that. it the live action remake does not make it new. It adds some depth here and there and adds a few additional backstory things just to help ground it, but it certainly is not new. How to Train Your Dragon live action is almost a shot-for-shot remake of the original animated film. And I was so skeptical about that. But for some reason, it works. And I do think it holds that original magic of the 2010 film. I think a lot of fans would agree with me that they went to the theater and had a good time watching this movie. So why? Why is it that this live action remake works even if it's a shot for shot and it's basically the same thing? Well, here are my opinions. Here are a few reasons why I think it actually works in this instance, and I have hope for the rest of the remake series for How to Train Your Dragon. First and foremost, a huge reason why this remake is successful is the director, Dean DeVois. And it's because he worked on the original film. He was, co-director for the original 2010 animated film, and he is an animation guy, okay? So this is a director who really cares about the story, who has been, like, the head of this story for over a decade, and has, a lot of respect for it, and for the series, and I feel like that's just such an important part of making a remake, is a director who actually cares. And so having Dean DeVois back on for this live action, even though he's not a live action film person, like, he did it. He was able to use his experience and he spent so long thinking about this story, thinking about these characters, and really caring about the fans and the people who love this story. So he made a banger because he knows that the original was so good, and he wasn't going to, fix what isn't broken, I guess. And that leads us to the shot-for-shot remake of it all, right? Okay, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like I said, I was really nervous about the shot-for-shot nature of this film, partially because it's easier to compare the films because they are shot-for-shot. It's really easy to be like, oh, this scene is just like this scene. Let's compare them and basically tear them apart. And instead of feeling like a really bad copy of the original, it actually feels new. It feels like a new lens that you're watching this story through. And it somehow works really, really well. The way I like to think about it is that watching this remake is like watching your favorite play from a different theater company. So the script and the stage directions are the same, but the actors on set and the scenery and the costumes all feel a little different. So it is the same story. It's the same, basic script, but you're seeing it done in a different way. And that is what this film felt like. And I personally love that. I love going to see my favorite musicals, my favorite plays over and over again from different groups doing them. Getting to see, okay, how did this actor portray this character? Getting to see, oh, how did this director view this scene? How did this set designer decide to portray this set? That's one of my favorite things about theater, is the interpretation of it. And I think seeing this film was kind of like that, like seeing just a new set of faces to a very familiar story. Another reason why the shot-for-shot works is that it's really nostalgic. Like, the original was so phenomenal and such a tight script and such a tight show, that they didn't have to mess with it too much in this new version. Like, they, they used what already works, and those of us who have watched the original 5 million times, can go into this movie and feel that nostalgic connection. And it honestly kind of felt like seeing it for the first time again in theaters. And that was magical. It was absolutely magical. Another huge reason why the 2025 film works is specifically actor Mason Thames. Okay? This boy was Hiccup, okay? And it would not have worked without him. He just has that awkwardness figured out, okay? Like, his performance did not feel cheesy or overdone. He felt very grounded in his character. I feel like sometimes when actors are trying to portray an animated character, they feel cheesy. They do feel like completely over the top and strange. But Mason Thames, I was in this story because of him. Because he wasn't pretending to be Hiccup. He was Hiccup. He carried this film. He carried the heart of this film. And I don't know how he did it. I am thoroughly impressed with his acting ability. And I'm so excited to see what he can do with the character moving forward as well. And as a side note, when he had to eat the fish that Toothless gives back to him, I almost puked. I cannot watch that. He did a great job. And apparently the actor does not like fish. And it was fish. So that's part of it too. I'm sure he just genuinely did not want to eat that. But his acting was phenomenal. He is able to take the story seriously and make me believe in it in a way that I think some of the other actors did not. However, I did love all the other kid actors who played the teens. I felt like all of those actors did a great job of, again, being their characters and, yes, being funny and silly and ridiculous, but also grounded. And just made it believable. It was just super fun to see these characters again in a new way. And I think they all did a good job embracing those characters. I will say I had a hard time with some of the adults. So Gobber and Stoic, I wasn't quite there as much with them. And I hate to say that because Gerard Butler literally is Stoic. And it's so cool to see him back for his role. But it's really, I don't think anyone could be Stoic in the live action very well because this is where animation, it gets hard because in the animation, he is literally built in a way that is not humanly possible. He's massive. He's this massive dude. And it's supposed to be over the top and ridiculous. And no adult can look that crazy, right? So for Gerard Butler, I did feel like he was a little too over the top and a little too almost, I don't know. It almost felt silly sometimes. Sorry to say. And I don't think that's necessarily Gerard Butler's fault. Maybe it's just the fact that he has to compare himself physically to the Stoic animated character, and that is impossible to do. The other half of what made this film work was Toothless. This is probably one of the hardest things about live action remakes from animation is non-human characters. I'm talking Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. I'm talking Sonic. I'm talking they've got the characters who could end up looking terrible, right? And especially Toothless. Toothless is such an important character. He's the other half of the duo. We need him to we need to love him. We need to learn to love him just as Hiccup does. And it's how can Toothless was a make or break piece of this film. He needed to be realistic in a live action setting and not look strange in a live action setting, but he couldn't lose his cuteness that makes him relatable and lovable and like a little cat. And so I don't know how they did it, but these animators and CGI people did this so well, because Toothless does look like he fits in with the rest of the world, and all of the dragons do, but they were able to keep Toothless a little rounded and adorable and cute, and portrayed his movements in a way that made sense. I do think that this 2025 Toothless is not as strong as the original, because I do feel like the animated Toothless has a stronger characterization, because in animation they can go way over the top with his movements. In this live action film, Toothless has been toned down with his expressions and his movements in order to fit a realistic environment. I don't say that's wrong, that's just the nature of how it is, because you couldn't have a superly overly animated dragon in the middle of this live action forest, okay? But what it does do is it kind of makes Hiccup even more of a main character in the 2025 film, whereas I feel like the animated film has both Hiccup and Toothless as more equal main characters, equal partners, and this film is mostly Hiccup, and Toothless is kind of like the sidekick, even though their relationship is still like a main part of the film. But I do think that this live action remake, because of the nature of Toothless, I do think that Hiccup, it feels more defined and more focused on Hiccup specifically. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think it's a little bit of a different shift. And the shift is not huge. Like this is a shot-for-shot remake. We have all of those pieces in play. But because of just the way Toothless is, I think Hiccup is the more of the focus rather than Toothless. And it works. And it's good. And I like it. It's just a little bit different than the original in that way. But Toothless they made it work. They made it look good. All of the dragons looked amazing. And I'm very interested to see what we get in the second film for like the Bewilder Beasts and like all these other crazy awesome dragons. It's Cloud Jumper, gonna be amazing. Can't wait. Okay. Next, here we go. I want to talk about scenery and costuming really quick. Both phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. On my second watch of the film, because it is on Netflix right now, I was able to watch it again, and I spent a little more time focusing on the scenery and costumes, and I am really in awe of especially how the costumes are done, and every little detail in them. Everything looks really cool, and I just wish I could like go and like look at all the costumes. I need a traveling like museum of all their costumes. But it's cool that like this is a bit longer of a film. We're not tied to an animation rig of a character that has to have one outfit. So we get some characters wearing multiple things, and we get to see how it would look in real life. And yes, it's still a little over the top, right? Like this is like over the top Vikings with horned helmets and crazy capes and stuff. But it's just cool to see how they did that and made it real, and seeing how they the little details on Hiccup's vest and shirt, and like everyone just looks really good, and the costuming is amazing. The scenery as well, gorgeous, of course. They're out in these beautiful, beautiful sets, but also just things like making the, training ring work in a live action way. And they definitely were able to do that. Like it definitely feels like the world is real and Burke is real, and everything involved with that, from, filming real places to adding CGI and all of those things, like, really brought us to this, archipelago that feels real. The Burke Island that feels like an actual place. So just wanted to kudos to both the scenery and costuming. And of course, I have to include a little bit about the music of this film. I am obsessed with the original 2010 score of How to Train Your Dragon. It deserved more accolades than it got. Looking at you, Oscars. However, John Powell is back, because how could he not be, to write the music for this film. It is very similar. Having listened through the new recording again, like, there are all of those, like, classic beats that we know and love in Forbidden Friendship and Test Flight and all those things. However, it is, like a lot of live actions, like, elongated. The songs are longer because it's a longer film. They add more space for things to breathe. I also feel like this tone of this music was just a little, like, deeper. A little more, like, truly lower tones and drums and serious, which also makes sense because this is a live action. Things just naturally feel a little more serious. And I'm still going to be listening to the original soundtrack over this one just because the original is perfect. But still beautiful music, and it's really nice to see John Powell back for this film. So overall, I definitely cried in theaters watching this because it did feel like experiencing the movie for the first time all over again. Watching Hiccup and Toothless fly through the sky and change their world, and when Hiccup loses his leg at the end, sorry, spoilers, I guess. I hope I don't have to say spoilers. Like, I think you should know, like, hey, Hiccup loses his leg at the end. It all made me cry just like it originally did back in 2010. And I'm just so surprised and excited that we get to experience these films in a new way. And I don't normally say that about live action remakes, but they've made this work, and I hope that they take what they learned from this film and bring it into the second one, because they are, working on the second live action remake. I'm excited to see if they do change more as we go, or if they continue to make it kind of shot for shot, keep it the same. But I really have a lot of faith and trust in Dean DeBois right now about how he has done and what he will do. So excited to see where this goes, and really excited to see how Mason Thames continues to create such a believable Hiccup character, and excited for the entire cast and see how they grow and change into these characters as well. I didn't even mention so many of the other actors, but truly everyone is doing a great job, and I'm excited to see what happens. And let me know what you thought of it. Did you have a good time seeing this film? Do you still think the original is the best? Let me know. I love that on YouTube I can have a little more direct feedback from you guys with the comment section. So if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please go over to YouTube and leave a comment and a like, so I know that you're enjoying having Fanimated back. So really quick, let me talk about Fanimated and the podcast in general. For those of you who have listened to the podcast since 2018, I hope you're doing well. And to new folks, welcome. Thanks for stopping by. As I mentioned, the podcast was on hiatus starting September of 2023. I wasn't sure if we'd be coming back at that time, but I wanted to leave it kind of open to, maybe once in a while I would come back and talk about something I really needed to talk about. And How to Train Your Dragon classifies as something I need to talk about because it is my favorite film. And if you haven't listened to my episodes on the How to Train Your Dragon movies, please go back and watch them. I will link them down below. Listen to those because I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts and so many episodes about How to Train Your Dragon. Because it's a movie that impacted me greatly. So in the past 2.5 years, I have had a well-needed break to focus on other creative projects and personal life milestones. And, I think I do actually have some more things to say about animation. Even in this short amount of time, I think the animation industry has changed drastically, and there is a lot of new and exciting stuff happening. And so I can't promise any kind of constant release schedule or any episode consistency like I used to have. But this is kind of an experimental episode to see if it's something I want to return to. And so far, I'm honestly having a blast getting back into Fanimated. So please, please, please subscribe on YouTube so you know when new episodes are coming out. And I probably will be back. I can't say for sure how often, but animation is something I'm always going to be a huge fan of, and I find that I do have a lot more to say. So thank you so much for listening. I hope those on YouTube enjoyed watching me do a little bit of fan art, and please leave questions about the podcast or my art or how to train a dragon. And Fanimated has been just a spark of joy in my life for 8 years, and I know it's been a bright part of many listeners' days as well. And so I just want to bring a little bit more joy and life to the world at the moment. So thanks for being here. And as always, stay tuned and stay animated.